we're going to bring her on the show, ladies and gentlemen. And this is Valerie. Valerie, how are you doing, girl?
I'm great. It's so good to be on. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Man, thank you so much for your patience while we got kind of, through the gremlins of the night. It's always something interesting that happens is, you've got to kind of roll with it when a live show like this. So I really appreciate you being patient. And I want to remind everybody who's watching right now, if you have any questions for Valerie, be sure and pop them into the chat there in the broadcast. I'll be looking out for that throughout the night. We're going to hang out here for about a half hour and chat and talk about Valerie's journey through breast cancer. So, Valerie, you found us on the magical interwebs last year. Is that right?
I did. I actually live in Dallas. And so I was wanting to get involved with an event that was really giving back to the bigger picture of making a difference, looking into research, helping fund women to get mammograms and things that were actually making a difference, not only in our community, but big picture wide. And so we were psyched. We were coming to Drumathon. We were all decked out. And then my toddler vomited all over the car. And so we didn't get to make it. So then, of course, this year it wasn't in person. So I'm really, really excited to get to come in person in 2021.
That's so funny, man. Well, anytime you want to bring a vomiting toddler to Drumathon, it's totally okay. You can do that. We'll handle it. We'll help you out, man. We got volunteers for that kind of thing. We're like breast cancer survivor, kids getting sick. You got to help her stat, man. So were you able to watch Drumathon a couple of weeks ago?
I did. I watched it on and off. I had some family in town, but we got to check it out and it was really fun and really great and so exciting that you guys raised so much money. It's phenomenal.
Oh man, we had so much fun doing that. But I want to make sure that we really get into the full conversation about your journey through breast cancer. And you and I just recently met. I mean, I'm talking like we just started talking for the first time today. I had heard about you. We had you booked for the show, and I reached out and I was like, hey, girl, let's do this. And you're like, let's go. So take us through your journey through breast cancer. How was it first found?
So I started a new job. I had finished graduate school. I was staying at home with my son while my baby, he was a baby, he was 10 months old, got a new position. And so when I started the position, I decided to stop breastfeeding. And so I stopped breastfeeding in May of 2017. And as I was stopping breastfeeding, I noticed that I had a lot of pain in my left breast. I thought it was maybe like a clogged milk duct or something. So I went to my OB and we talked about it. And she was like, you don't have a history of breast cancer. You have no family history of cancer. I don't see how this is even possible that it would be that, but I'm just going to send you to a breast specialist just to be sure. And it took not even 2 weeks. They pushed me through so fast. I went to a breast specialist. She did an ultrasound that same day. She sent me across the hall for a mammogram. And the doctor that did the mammogram said, they're going to do a biopsy, but it's not going to be good. So you just need to prepare yourself. So I got the diagnosis on June 17th of 2017. And I did my first round of chemo on June 27th. It was the week that my son turned 1. So I did my first chemo the week that he turned 1, and we celebrated his first birthday.
Wow, that I can't even imagine going through that with a toddler. That had to be so very hard. So, what do you know what it was about what they found that made them so sure? Like it sounded like they just knew something was up before they even did the biopsy.
It was really large. It was a really large tumor, and it was very defined. And when it started, when we did the mammogram and when they did the ultrasound, they said, like maybe it'll be cancerous, but it'll probably be ductal. And so they kind of walked me through the scenario of what that would look like. And honestly, that's best case scenario in the situation that I was in. And so after we got back the biopsy, I was triple negative, and they had no idea how long it had been coming on because I'd been breastfeeding for, a year. And before that, I'd been pregnant. So it's really hard to know, what's going on your breasts when you're pregnant or breastfeeding. So they were like, this could have grown to this huge size within months. And so that was when the breast surgeon sat me down and she was like, look, we're going to do genetic testing. It came back all negative. So she was like, we have to be very aggressive with this because it's very aggressive with you. And so she said, we're going to come at it hard. We're going to do very aggressive chemo. I suggest, a lumpectomy or a mastectomy after that. They said that they wanted to do chemo first because they needed to track and make sure that it was regressing or going away. Because if they did a mastectomy or a lumpectomy first, they couldn't actually confirm that the tumor was going away. And that was their fear, was that they wanted to make sure that if it was anywhere else in my body, they were starting out of the gate with chemo, and that they were killing all the cancer that they could. So yeah, we started strong, and it was very, very fast. It was like having your world turned upside down in a reality that you didn't even know could exist. And then there it is.
Wow. Yeah. How old were you, if you asking?
I was 34.
Wow. That's super young. And that's one of the things about triple negative breast cancer. It's known for going after the younger people, which is crazy. I was curious, you were mentioning that you had been breastfeeding all along. Did that cause you any fear? Like, were you like, I would be thinking, is there any way that could affect your son or anything like that? You know what I mean? Like, I
Oh,
would
for
just be
sure.
thinking like that. I don't know the answer, but did you
They
ask about
said
that?
no. I mean, I did ask, like, well, what if this tumor was growing and I was breastfeeding? Could I have been giving him some sort of cancer cancer through the breast milk? I don't know. And they were like, no, that's not how this works. These are very cut and dry. It's this entire process, which I'm once we get to the end zone of our family dynamic and where we are now. It has been a lot of questions like that, where I'm like, where does my cancer fit in with the way I ended up building a family? And I think it's always going to be nerve wracking, but I know you're a fellow triple negative survivor, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so it's kind of this scary unknown, right? I feel like people that are diagnosed, and I'm not saying other cancers aren't scary. They're other breast cancers, hormone positive, are very, very scary. What the fear that it left me with was that there was no habit that I could change, that I felt like I was making a change to make sure it didn't come back. It wasn't like I could say, I need to cut out these foods out of my life, or I need to make sure that I'm not exposed to these certain hormones in my cleaning products, or in my deodorant, or whatever else, that people say a lot when you have breast cancer. With triple negative, there was nothing. There was no answer that they could give to say this could have been a driver. And so that was the part that really scared me, was what did I bring to the table to make this happen in the first place, but also how do I prevent it from coming back, and how do I prevent it affecting my children that are really young, whether it be a pregnancy, which I ended up actually having a pregnancy post cancer, or breastfeeding my son.
Right. Wow. Yeah. I think that that's something that's really super common among breast cancer survivors is when you get diagnosed, you're like, okay, what caused it? Like you instantly start thinking like that. At the time, I lived in an area where there were a lot of plants, like cement plants and chemical plants and stuff like that. And so I'm thinking, was that it? Or, like you said, was it the deodorant? Was it something, a soap I was using, something I was eating, where did it come from? And that's always your first thought. And my doctor, she was like, it's just not that simple. It's just not
Mm-hmm.
that simple. And in fact, Dr. Joyce O'Shaughnessy, we have a lot of her fact or fiction played with it earlier tonight, where she kind of gets into a lot of that and explains, like, for example, they haven't been able to trace it back to deodorant, and that's something that a lot of people think, or underwires. A lot of people, there's a thing around there about underwires. It's also something about keeping your cell phone in your bra, and she kind of busts all those myths and everything. But she does give some really amazing tips for preventing recurrence for triple negative breast cancer. So I'm definitely going to that link. Check that out if you haven't seen that. That's one of the things I think it's so important for the breast cancer survivor to know what can you do to prevent it from coming back. If there is anything, what? So I'll definitely send that link. So, what kind of surgery did you end up having? You had the chemo, and that went along for how long?
I did 8 rounds of dose dense. So I did 1 week on and 1 week off. So I did 4 rounds of the Red Devil of ACT. And I actually worked during the time because I had started this new job. It was a very strange occurrence, right? You start a job and then find out 3 weeks in you have cancer. So I would work from home the weeks that I did chemo, and then I would go into the office on the off weeks, and I wore wigs and I functioned like normal. It turned out people thought that I people didn't even know I had cancer that worked with me. It was so bizarre because I'm living in this world that's upside down, and they apparently thought I was just business as usual. But did the Red Devil, and then I did 4 rounds of dose dense Taxol. And so I finished chemo in October, and we moved forward with a double mastectomy in November. And they actually gave me a choice, and I was really, really torn. I know that it's a personal choice that people make. I was at a place where I was, 34 years old. I had a 1 year old. I didn't want to go the route that, did the most to my body because I was afraid of missing out on parts of my son's life while I couldn't hold him or whatever else. But I remember being really afraid that if I got a lumpectomy and something came back, that I could have stopped that by doing a mastectomy. And so I talked to a friend that I had met through the program who was the same age as me, and she also had triple negative. And she said, look, I decided to do whatever I could to make sure I was alive for my children to grow up. Like there was, even if it was the worst to my body, I was like, this is what I need to do to feel the most confident that I'm going to be here 20 years from now. So I said, okay, you're right. So I went forward with a mastectomy in November, and I got the call actually the week of Thanksgiving that I was cancer free. That when they did the mastectomy, everything came back clear. The gosh,
Margins.
I'm losing it. Yes,
Yeah.
my margins were clear.
Right.
They had taken some lymph nodes. They were all clear. So they
It's like the
actually
best
said that,
call ever.
yes, they
Yeah.
said we think that maybe chemo alone killed it. Like we don't think
Wow.
that surgery, was necessarily necessary. But so yeah, so it was great news. And then from that point, I just had to move forward with reconstruction.
Wow. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough decision. Like you said, it's a very personal decision, and I felt much like you. I was like, what can I do to up my chances? And they do say that a lumpectomy or a mastectomy, your chances are the same for recurrence. But the way I kind of look at it is, if I don't have breast, there's not as much area for it to come back in. And then the other part was for me anyway, is I felt that, if I did have a recurrence, it would be easier to find. Um, well, as far as like me not doing, I didn't instruction. That's kind of my mind thought was at the time. But you're right. It's like a very personal decision. The point of lumpectomy versus mastectomy, or if you want to do reconstruction or not, and there's no wrong, decision. It's just very personal, and you have to do what you feel is right for you. And especially like you said, having a young child, and wanting to be there for everything, and just feeling like you can do everything possible. That's what you're gonna do. So did they stage you? Like, what stage did they say you were?
They staged me 2B. The lymph nodes were questionable all along. They couldn't get a clear read before I started chemo, and even during chemo if it was in my lymph nodes. So really, when I had the mastectomy, they're like, we don't think it was ever there, but if it got there, it was like just getting there when we started this. So the reason I was staged 2B was because the tumor was so large.
Yeah, mine was actually really small. I know we haven't ever talked about this before. Mine was like 10 millimeters or something. It was super, super small. And so mine was stage one. But the thing is with triple negative breast cancer, for those watching, they may not be familiar, but triple negative breast cancer is more rare, more aggressive. It's more likely to recur. The one thing about it, though, and Dr. O'Shaughnessy talked about this at Drumathon, is it's fast growing. So if you're gonna have a recurrence, you're gonna have it within like an 8-year period, is what they say. And so once you hit that 8-year mark, that's when you get to like really, really party. You're like, woohoo. So, it's scary, but I'm sure you're still under care. You go in still periodically.
Yes, I actually, so my reconstruction I did in February of 2018. I did a deep flap, which is awesome. It's like a tummy tuck built in, right? So they took the fat from my stomach and they made me breasts with that. So they ended up being really large. And so it makes for checking things really difficult because what I've been told is that if I have a recurrence now, it would be on my chest wall or it would be close to the skin because of the way that my body was grafted post surgery. So I actually don't have regular scans. I just go in and do blood work, and I go in to the breast surgeon and they kind of feel around, if you will. But it's ended up being that because of the deep flap, they reconnect your nerves when they put them when they so complicated to try to explain. They take the fat, right? They put it here, then they try to reconnect the nerves so that my chest is like, oh, you are part of me now. And so every once in a while, those nerves decide not to play along anymore, and you get something called a fat necrosis, and it feels just like a tumor, and it feels like a stone or a rock inside your chest. I got
Wow.
fat necrosis
How
within the
often
first
how often
few.
can that happen? Can it just happen any time?
They've told me it could happen forever. So I
Wow.
mean, I'm hoping that my nerves end up playing nice long term. I did have a fat necrosis that formed within a few months after my surgeries, right in my tumor site, which I'm sure you can imagine was very triggering. And I was like, nope, you're cutting that out. Like I can't have this here. It's too much. And then I've had little, they call them oil cysts, which are like tiny, tiny feeling hard pebbles. But it's strange. I'm very satisfied with the direction I went because to me, it feels more natural. And I also feel safer not having a foreign object in my body. However, I will say this nerve situation that happens in this fat necrosis is really nerve wracking. So even I think 2 months ago, we had another scare where I went in, I didn't think anything. She was feeling around. She was like, nope, I feel something. And, I got panicked. They sent me for some scans. They found out it was scar tissue. But this process that you go through and those 2, 3 weeks that it takes to go get the ultrasound or go get the MRI, it's so overwhelming, kind of puts you back in this really big fear zone. So there are definite pros and cons to it
Well,
for sure.
to your point, you're in that you said the fear zone, and that is something that is so common with breast cancer survivors. The worst part about going through breast cancer, in my opinion, was the waiting for test results. And so there you are again, and you're having all this stuff happen where it's, you know, you think you have tumors again. There's something going on, especially the one that was near your original site. And then they're having to do things, and then you're having to wait for test results all over. And it's just like, I mean, that's one of the hardest things is those waiting for test results. And then, post going through breast cancer, having these other scares. And, you just can't look at anything like you used to. You always have
Right.
that in the back of your mind. Am I having a recurrence? But I'm really glad to hear that you're staying so on top of that. I mean, even though it sounds like most of the time it's going to be just fine, you follow through and you're like, "No, I'm checking this out," and you keep following it through to make sure
For
everything's
sure. I feel
okay.
like I've almost become a hypochondriac, but I'm like, it's
Yeah.
you got to do what you got to do. And I will say that if breast cancer taught me anything, I mean the physical journey that you have to go through to be strong, especially with chemo, or like with the deep flap, right? They're cutting into your abdomen and your chest at the same time. So it's a lot of damage to your body, a lot of healing that's needed, relearning to stand up straight. But the mental hardship that you have to go through, it turns you into a completely different person. I mean, I am not the same person that I was when I walked into those doors in 2017. And I think that when these reoccurrence fears happen, you have to go to that mental strong place that you managed to establish when you went through treatment, because it's some place that unless someone has had a really big a life fear, like a fear of death, I don't know that they are as honed in on how to tap into that. But you just have to go back there and you know get in the best mindset you can get in and push forward.
Yeah, it's like that saying that they have, you don't know how strong you are until as strong as all you've got. And it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's totally true. It's like, you have to get your head in the game and you're like, all right, we're gonna take this on, and you just have to go after it. It's super scary. So when you went through chemotherapy, did you lose your hair and everything like that? Did you have all the standard
I
stuff? Tell
did.
us a little bit about what you experienced. I know everybody has a little bit of a different experience, so.
I am not a researcher. I like to say to people, like, if there's a car crash coming, I don't want to know it's coming. So I didn't read about the chemos that I was doing. I mean, I think I read the one page that they put in the binder about the drug that they were infusing me with. But I was just like, will I lose my hair? This is the one thing I need to know. Like, am I going to lose my hair? Yes. Okay. So I did my first round of chemo that week that my son had his first birthday. We celebrated his party on July 1st, and I shaved my head on the 4th of July. My friends came over and shaved my head for me. And so I ended up losing all my hair. When I was going through the Red Devil, it was a lot of nausea, a lot of exhaustion. Um, it's I don't even know. I don't even know how to describe that. That one was real hard, really, really hard. And then when you moved into Taxol, a lot of my side effects were more like bone pain. I remember telling my sister that my skull hurt, and she was like, "Oh, you have a headache." And I was like, "No, no, my skull hurts." And I don't even know how to describe that. It was just this feeling that I was getting because from the Taxol, but it was something that I didn't even know you could feel. So
Yeah, I
the side
remember that.
effects were things where they'd come at you and you'd be like, "What is this?" And I'd be calling the nurse like, "Oh my God, I feel like I'm dying." And she'd give you a new prescription, and you powered through it, and you just went along. So there was definitely some real crazy things that happened. But with losing my hair, I did get to buy some super fun wigs. And I had like platinum pink hair, I had gray hair, I had blue hair, I had purple hair. And one week at work, there was someone that was coming in from the office that was out of state. And I had meetings with this person 3 different days in a row, and I wore a different wig every day. And he didn't realize it was the same person. It was very fun.
That's so awesome, man. I love that. That's crazy. So when you were talking about that your skull hurt, I'm wondering if it was this feeling that I remember having. But I thought I had mine like after my first or second round of AC. So it was kind of like it was before I lost my hair. It actually felt like, like if somebody comes and pulls your hair really hard and then they let go, and your head just has that feeling like, or like whenever you have like a ponytail in too tight and then you take it out and you're like, oh, and you're kind of going like this. That I remember having that feeling early on. And it was when my hair was just starting to fall out. Did it feel like that, or was it something different?
It was different. I do know what you're describing. I remember that with, well, I mean, my head was shaved, but I remember feeling that kind of like tingling feeling and pressure feeling
Right.
as the hair was coming out. Um, Taxol, they give you Claritin for the bone pain. So you're taking Claritin, and you also take steroids, but it is I've never broken a bone, but it just feels like the bone itself is throbbing. It is such a strange thing to try to describe. And sometimes I would have it like on my shins or my ankle, but the one specifically that I remember the most was my skull, that it hurt in my skull. It was
Like you're sitting there talking
crazy.
about it, I can almost envision it. Like I feel like my head is hurting when you're talking about it. I'm like, I know what you mean. I could feel it right now. It's like, I mean, it's like that throbbing. Yeah, and it's not. It couldn't be described as like a headache, but I think it all goes back to all the bone pain and everything that all this caused. And were you doing the Elasta shots as well? Were you doing those?
I was doing the new Nulasta. I would wear it home like the people do on the commercials. I remember one time because it doesn't warn you. I think maybe it beeps, but it was beeping like right when it went in. I was sitting there watching TV with my son, and I like jumped a mile and was like, "Oh my God, that hurt!" But um, yes, I did get that the Nulasta. It was I just tell people that now, like when I've gotten a tattoo or something and people are like, "Oh, does that hurt?" No. Let me tell you what hurts.
Right.
That hurt. I can
Yeah.
survive anything else. That
Yeah.
kind of pain is a different kind of pain.
Right, right. You know, it's funny is this whole thing that you wear home and you get the Neulasta shot now. That wasn't a thing when I went through breast cancer in 2010, 2011. So like I had to drive back up there 2 days after my chemo to actually get the shot, and they gave you the shot in your stomach. And so I had to do that like 2 days after each adriamycin cytoxin treatment, the AC, the first few. But did you experience any neuropathy at all, or like did your fingernails brown? Or did you have like the skin on? Like I had the skin on my feet peel off. It was like crazy.
I remember the skin on my wrist peeled off during Taxol, but I actually iced. I iced my hands and my feet. So I found these like gloves on Amazon, and it was almost like those ice packs that you see in the freezer, only they were shaped like hands. So you put your hand in between two ice packs, and then it had like a mitt over it. So I would get them frozen, before I went to chemo, and I would do 15 minutes on, and then I'd take them off, and then I do 15 minutes on, then take them off. And I also had booties that I wore. I don't know if that was what saved me or if it was just luck of the draw, but um, I am really grateful for that. I've had some loss of feeling in my fingertips. So like I've had some numbness that goes up my arm since the surgeries, but they actually think that that's kind of like nerve damage and me having nerve issues, that it's not something from the neuropathy. Because when I hear stories about people who lose feeling permanently, I can't, that, that sucks. Like, I feel so bad for them.
Yeah, that sounds so scary. I'm glad I didn't experience any of that either. I know a lot of people do experience some really horrible neuropathy. For me, I just had it in my feet. I described it like walking on hot coals when I with my feet, like even just my feet sitting on the ground, like when I'm sitting in a chair, just my feet barely touching the carpet. It was like hot, crazy. The whole thing about the icing, that's another new thing is there's icing for everything. It's like you can ice your hands and your feet to prevent neuropathy, and then you can also do cold caps to prevent hair loss. I don't think it works for everybody, or maybe it doesn't work all the time. But there's all this stuff that has to do with icing that's out there now that you can prevent a lot of these things. And I always wonder to myself, like, would I do that? And for me, like, I hate being cold. Like, cold is so painful to me. I think I would have still just shaved my head and just like, I don't care, because I can't handle the cold at all. You were
I
mentioning,
can't imagine.
yeah,
You were talking about how sensitive everything felt, right? Especially your head when you lose that hair. I can't imagine then putting ice on it. I mean, I remember having to put ice on it when I was having hot flashes, but that was later down the road. I can't imagine having to cold cap while you have that tingling kind of pain sensation going on in your hair follicles. That would be
yeah, I
super.
know, and that weird pain, the hair follicle pain that we're talking about, that's so bizarre too. Like nobody ever told me about that. They weren't like, "Hey, this is gonna happen." Like there was a lot of that was happening that I was like, "Wait, my nails turned brown." The skin on my feet, the neuropathy, all these different things. I was like, man, they need like a pretty thick pamphlet for this whole experience. You're talking earlier about all the nerve reconnecting, which is so interesting in your breast and everything. For me, like I had the double mastectomy without reconstruction, and so there's good portions of my chest that I can feel. I don't like to have it touched. Like I have a little 11-pound dog, and if she walks across, like it feels. I just don't like the way it feels, and it's also very sensitive in that like it hurts if you push too hard on my chest because there's nothing there to protect it. Do you have all the feeling back in your breast? Like, can you feel everything since they used
I
your
can
own?
feel nothing.
Oh, really?
So I have no feeling from like my waist up to probably here. And then I have no feeling under my armpits in. So it is, I've heard rumors that it might come back down the road. I was doing a stretch at physical therapy the other day where I like had, it was almost like a back bend over a foam roller. And as I arched my back really back, I felt a nerve in my chest. And it was like it was not a good feeling, but I was like, oh my God, I have a feeling.
Right.
So it's I don't know. It is strange in the fact that like I have young kids and they climb all over you and they push you, and I'll get like a bruise and I have no idea where it came from because I have no recollection of them doing it because I can't feel it.
Right. You never
Um,
you never experienced the pain that would have been associated with that, and you're just like, what the heck happened?
yeah, someone could punch me and
Yeah, you'd be
I
like,
mean, in
whatever.
this range.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and for me, like I said, there are areas that I do have feeling, but the majority I don't. But sometimes I'll just get these really sharp pains, where my breasts were. And I swear it feels like somebody has a voodoo doll somewhere. I'm like, hey, what's up here? It's just like this very sharp, specific pain in my chest. So I want to give a few shout outs real quick, Valerie. So people are commenting over here. So I'll make sure and call them out. So Petra just wants to say thank you for sharing your story. Mark Bearden says, I hope you had a great support system. Randy says, my wife lost her hair and never came back, and it never came back today. Her doctor had only seen that happen one other time. That's crazy, Randy. That's rough, man. That's hard. I've heard of that happening before, but you're right, it's not very common. And I just want to remind y'all that are watching, if you guys have any questions for Valerie, she told me earlier today that she's an open book. We can ask her anything, so feel free to pop any questions you might have in. So you're just going in and doing blood work now. You're all good. They keep checking you. Everything's coming back good. You're having to get these little nerve things, these little cysts and different lumps checked out and tackle those. But aside from that, you're doing pretty good. Any other things that are kind of like, did you go through menopause, I assume? And are you out of menopause, or how did
So
that work for you?
I don't take tamoxifen or
Tamoxifen, yeah.
yes, thank
That
you.
doesn't work for us.
I don't take anything because I had clear margins when I did my double mastectomy. So I got to dodge the radiation bullet, which for triple negative, they really love radiation for that. So I didn't end up having to do radiation. I don't have to be on tamoxifen. So once I kind of did the reconstruction, the one thing that I felt like I could still control and that I needed to know was if I could have another kid. Because when this happened, it happened so quickly that my breast surgeon, my breast specialist was like, we don't have time. Like, we don't have time for you to decide if you're going to freeze any eggs. Like, you have got to start chemo now if we want to save your life. And that is what our priority is. So I was like, okay. So in March or April of the year of 2018, I went to a fertility doctor to get my levels checked and to find out like if basically if chemo had destroyed all my eggs. And so I went to this fertility doctor. She did some blood work. She came back, my AMH levels, which I guess is what they kind of guesstimate how many eggs you have left and the quality of them. My AMH level was ridiculously low, like 0.003 or something so low that she said, like, if I got a 0.4, I would maybe recommend this, but you're a 0.003. So that was kind of like my last thing that I felt like cancer took from me after the fact. And I was very angry. It was a big struggle for me at the time. And I was trying to figure out what to do because I just felt like we were meant to have a second child. And I actually had my best friend come forward and say that she was willing to be an egg donor if we needed to go that route. And so I was thinking about this and I'm kind of going back and forth. And I actually did a second surgery to fix kind of some reconstruction with the plastic surgeon with my chest and my stomach. Because when they do the big, deep flap surgery, you're super swollen. They don't exactly know how things are going to look. So they kind of do a couple nip tucks here after the fact to fix things up. So I go in June to have this surgery. And so I have the surgery done and I'm sick for weeks and weeks. And I keep telling the surgeon, I'm like, look, I don't know if these meds are making me sick, but I feel horrible. And so he's like, I don't know what the problem is. So I ended up taking a pregnancy test and I was pregnant. I actually was 10 weeks pregnant. So I got pregnant the week that I went to the fertility doctor and she said it wasn't possible. So imagine everyone's surprise.
Holy crap.
I had to call.
That was meant to be, though. That's so awesome.
And be like, hey, we went under anesthesia and you did a surgery and I was pregnant. And so again, those fears, right? Like, what was I doing? I was pregnant. I had no idea, but everyone assured me it was great. I was super closely monitored and I had my rainbow baby in January 2019. It was a girl. And yeah, I mean, it was shocking and beautiful. And it was like, kind of like fate was giving me back something after it had taken so much. And so I kind of got a lull of being monitored during that time. And of course, I couldn't breastfeed. I got in contact with a really great nonprofit organization that supplies vetted donor breast milk to women who can't breastfeed. So they do it for a lot of cancer survivors. So they donated breast milk. It was a really beautiful, shocking, surprising, wonderful experience.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I just go to checkups now. I have two small, crazy children, and hopefully I get to be here to watch them grow up and get married and, do all the adult shenanigans that they're doing as kids. Right?
Right. No, that's so amazing. Wow. So what was the name of that nonprofit? We should give them a plug. The folks that provide vetted breast milk. That's so awesome. I've never even heard of that. So they do that a lot for cancer survivors.
It is. They're actually located here in Texas. I think they're headquartered out of Amarillo. The guy
Cool.
who started it, he lost his sister in childbirth, and so he started this organization. He's a firefighter. This is just something he does on the side. But the name of the organization is Third Strand. And I have really been, since having Adelaide, which is my daughter, and going through this experience, whenever I'm on these breast cancer Facebook groups like Babies After Breast Cancer, Babies After Cancer, and people say things, I'm like, you should call them. And so he has had a huge uptake in the donations that he's been able to provide. And now he's even shipping all over the place. I think he shipped some breast milk to Pennsylvania last week to a girl who was a breast cancer. She was actually in
Wow.
treatment that he was sending it to. So,
That's so awesome. Third strand.
yes.
Wow. That's so cool, man. This has been such a cool chat with you, Valerie, because I mean, every single story is so different. And it's just, what a story of miracles, with your 1 year old and having that happening while you're going through everything, and then getting pregnant when the odds were stacked against you. I mean, that was meant to be. I'm sure that you're going to be around for a really long time to see all of this. So, wow, what an awesome story. Des is in the broadcast, and they want to know, do you have any regrets about anything that you went through as far as decisions that you made along the way?
I think sometimes that I regret not knowing some of the side effects that I was going up against, um, especially ones that involved constipation. I wish I had known that that was going to be a serious one. I wish that I had been more involved in my community before, which I know is such a strange thing to say. But my husband and I are actually from Kansas. We've lived here in Texas for over 10 years, but we we didn't know a lot of people. And so the support system I had came from my friends. And then I had a lot of family that would come down from Kansas. I had chemo buddies where my friends would switch out who would come with me to chemo. But I now looking back, I have met some survivors since then where, they have their church that rallies around them, or they have their neighborhood that rallies around them. And I didn't have that. And so I think that that would have also helped me mentally in moments where I felt really alone, or where I felt like that I was having to explain what was going on to people, whereas like people being aware of it. So those things. And then I think probably just working on my mindset as much as I could going into the gate, and continuing to strengthen, um, how to stay positive when things feel like they're not going to go that route. But I feel like, aside from the fat necrosis that I'm not a fan of, I feel like the outcome and where I am now is, I've been really lucky, and I hope that I continue to be that lucky. I hope that I don't have to do a fat necrosis or oil cyst scare every year, but if I get a scare, at least I go get a scan and they confirm that it's nothing. So
Well, like I said before, I'm so glad that you're staying on top of that, because it could be easy to just kind of get lazy about it and just be like, well, it's probably this, that, and the other thing. But yeah, we always got to stay on top of that stuff and stay on top of our health. I always say that no one cares more about our own ourselves do. So it's so important to stay on top of that. The one last question I have for you, Valerie, is every time I have a breast cancer survivor on the show, I like to ask, what is something positive that you got from going through breast cancer?
I oh, there's a lot. I think that the thing that I learned the most was that I am not valued or about this. So with losing my hair, I've done faux hawks. I have willingly cut it incredibly short. I look at things a lot more like this isn't what matters. This is. And so it gave me some really good perspective on where to prioritize things with myself, but also how to take things seriously that should be taken seriously, and how to kind of relax about things that aren't worth the amount of stress and anger and focus that we give them. If some of this did come from being stressed a lot or not being in a good mindset, I want to be the person now that can laugh it off when it warrants being able to be laughed off.
It's all about perspective. That's something that I think we all gain. Don't sweat the small stuff, right? So
For
it's
sure.
super important. Well, Valerie, girl, it's such a pleasure to meet you and get to chat and everything. And I'm so glad that we have you as one of our supporters out there. Breast Cancer Can Stick It, and we have a group called Survivors Rock, a breast cancer can stick it community. If you're not a part of that, I hope you will join. It is actually linked from the caption of this broadcast. We would love to have you over there if you're not already there. And any other breast cancer survivors out there right now, we would love to have you join as well. It's a great place to hang out and chat, and it's all about rock and roll there too, so we all have that in common. But Valerie, I want to thank you again for joining tonight, and I hope we get to talk again real soon, and keep us posted on how you're doing, okay?
I will. Thank you so much, April. I appreciate being
You
on.
bet. You have a great night. All right, guys, that's Valerie, man. She's a rock star. Loves having her tonight. It's always so cool to meet all these wonderful breast cancer survivors and hear